Matt, how much time do you spend qualifying buyers?
Kevin, we spend quite a lot of time going and digging deep with really what the needs are of the buyer. I think so much time's wasted with taking people to inspections that haven't got their finance arranged, not even really sure what they want to buy. So we do spend a lot of time with these buyers. I've got a couple of buyer managers within my team that go and deal with those buyers directly. So they'll follow up from the open home, find out what they're looking for, whether they've got their finance approved. We've got in-house finance brokers, which we can send the details across to. They'll come back to us and say, yeah, look, they're ready to purchase. And just simply asking the question, are you ready to buy?
So how many questions would you go through to get that qualifying process through?
First and foremost, we ask, did you like the property? What did you like about it? What didn't you like about it? And then we just ask the question, okay, well, and I think this is the most relative question, which a lot of agents don't ask, is, okay, well, do you want to buy it?
What sort of dialogue do you use to get people to commit to that buying process, Matt?
So I think what buyers really want to know is, one, that the owners are committed to sell it, and two, that it's going to represent good value. So what we do, we spend a lot of time with buyers educating. So at all of my open for inspections, I'll hand out a recent list of comparable sales. We send the buyers through. Even recently, when stock's been quite tight and we've wanted to process our stock a little quicker, I take buyers, all the hot buyers in our car, drive them around, show them the sales, show them the difference between the properties and try and justify the value of the property. So once they're there and they've made a decision on that's the property that they want, it's just trying to represent that property is good value.
How do you do that?
Well,
because a lot of your properties are auction properties.
A lot of them are auction.
Yeah, so how do you demonstrate that when you can't talk price?
Recent sales. We sort of throw in 5 or 6 or 7 maybe recent sales, a couple that are higher, a couple that are lower, and then just sell the motivation that the seller's really committed to sell it, that they're moving on to something else, or tell the story of what they want. But with all the properties that we have at the moment, there is a genuine story behind these people. We don't take on unrealistic sellers. So a lot of the people that go to auction and spend big money on marketing in our marketplace are committed sellers. So we just keep telling that story, and I think it's easy for the buyers to commit then.
So when you get a buyer to auction, they've got an understanding about the value in their mind that you may have helped them, guide them to that. Sure. You get to the point where you maybe need another $10,000 out of them on the floor. What's the dialogue you use there?
Well, there's one thing. Say, for example, if we have a reserve of, say, $1 million, and we've got the buyer at 990 and no one else is bidding, what I'll do is I'll go and talk to the buyer, to the highest bidder, and say, look, you're the highest bidder at the moment. Unfortunately, it's not enough to get the property on the market. Can I ask you a question? Would you pay 1.2?
So you go over the reserve?
Go well over. So it's far easier to ask for more and to get a little increase than to ask for what you want and then not increase at all. So we generally go over and then step them down. So we say 1.2, they generally say go away. We go, okay, well, surely to God you'd see value at 115. They say no, and it's like, well, how close to that can you get? And sometimes they might say, okay, well, we'll give you 1.1 if you go away, or we'll give you $1 million, and then that sort of bridges that gap.
Got the deal done.
Yeah.
So at what point do you go back to the seller and get them to try and bring their reserve down?
Well, usually we try and smash the seller's expectation first. We try and negotiate the price above their reserve and then go back to them. We'll never disclose a reserve to a buyer, or unless it's on the market. And we usually try and, whatever the seller wants, it's not our job to get them what they want. It's our job to get them as much as we possibly can in the market and smash their expectations. So we generally, even if we're going in an auction forum, we're over the reserve, well, we'll disclose it's on the market when it's in the best interest for the seller.
Matt, when we have a buyer's market, how do you get the buyer to commit? Because they're convinced that they're the ones who've got the power.
Yeah, sure. Well, at the moment, thankfully, we're in a bit of a seller's market in our marketplace and there's not much stock. But in a buyer's market, realistically, to differentiate yourself and your product and your property that you're selling to the rest of the market is you've just got to show that it represents great value. One other thing we sort of try and tap into is that it's the right lifestyle for them, that it's going to sit well for what they want, and you just have to do that through the qualification process. I think at the end of the day, if there's 50 properties on the market and only 5 or 6 buyers in there, realistically it's going to be the value that it comes down to. Yeah. So it's promoting that it represents really good value, and I think persistence. I think the deal dies when the agent gives up, and if a but agents in those sorts of marketplaces are so destined on showing a buyer one property, and then as soon as they say, oh, I didn't like that house because of that reason, they'll just take that buyer to the next property, and they'll just give them too many choices. Our job as agents is to sell that property and exhaust every single opportunity we can in relation to whatever the objections are with the property and to overcome them. So I think overcoming every objection that they have and presenting that it represents good value, I think that's the only way.
Hello and welcome to this week's auction update. We'll have a look in a moment with Geoff White at what's happened over the weekend. But briefly, we can see that buyers and sellers are adjusting their expectations. What does that mean? Geoff White will tell us all in just a moment.
Did you know you can save up to 70% on your staff costs by outsourcing the low-value, repeatable tasks so your team can focus on growing your business? Beepo is an outsourcing provider focused on the real estate industry. With an English-speaking, tertiary qualified and fully trained team in the Philippines, Beepo will give your business the boost it needs to start growing and returning value to you. For more information, visit beepo.com.au.
And we say once again a very big hello to Geoff White from CoreLogic. G'day, Geoff.
Hello, Kevin. How are you?
Good, mate. The headline for today, buyers and sellers are adjusting their expectations. While auction numbers were down, they still got a fairly good prelim result, didn't we?
Yeah, exactly, Kevin. Yes, the preliminary final weighted average there was 58.1. And if you compare that to the preliminary of last week, which was 58.8, so it's still in the 58s. And so, yeah, it's very comparable to last week. Although we did see with the Sydney clearance rate this week 65.6 as a preliminary from 441 auctions. Last week that was sitting as a preliminary at 66.6, so down 1%. And Melbourne was the one that did fall on the preliminary numbers more. Last week it was 60.8 and this week it's 56.8. So it's a 4% fall on the preliminary numbers this week. But overall, we're still within 1% of the weighted average nationally. So not a bad result.
Yeah, Brisbane coming in a little bit better than last week. From memory, it was a bit of a disastrous week in Brisbane, but up to almost 40% on 80 auctions.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, it's okay, and it's been at that on and off. And Adelaide, of course, above 50 with 51.9 from 84. Perth from the 18 auctions over there, over 50%, which is encouraging there. And Canberra under 50, 41.4, which is very interesting. Maybe there's too many other things going on in Canberra at the moment, Kevin.
I think that's probably the case, especially next weekend. There'll be some feathers flying next weekend, that's for sure. Yeah, so that'll be interesting to watch.
It'll be interesting, Kevin, between now and the final numbers. I did look at the differences between the preliminary and finals from last week. We saw the national weighted average drop by 6.3% between the preliminary and final numbers when we get all the other auction results come in. But the big one that changed last week was Sydney, where it fell down 9.4%. So if we're to see that, we're still going to see Sydney still in the mid to high 50s, if the same percentage. Melbourne came back 4.2% from preliminary to final last week, so it'll put it still above 50%. So it'll be interesting to see what the difference is this week when we wrap up some more auction results.
Have you? And this is a question without notice. I understand if you haven't got the stats in front of you, but last weekend, total auctions recorded the results at this time last week out of Sydney. Like this time, we're looking at total auctions of 441 and reporting results on 288. Did that vary much from last week, or is that about the same percentage?
About the same percentage.
Yep,
so
okay.
In Sydney, that's a 65%.
Yep.
So as at Sunday morning, we had 65% of the auctions conducted. Their results in Melbourne, we had about 80%, which is the same this week. So very similar. Yeah.
Well, it will be interesting to see if we get that same kind of dip out of Sydney by the end of the week.
That's right, exactly, and that has a big bearing on the overall national weighted. Yeah,
absolutely. And speaking of Sydney, let's go to the sub-regions for you. What have we got here, mate? City in the south. Good number of auctions there, 57 with a 76% clearance rate. That's not bad.
Yeah, exactly. That's pretty good. There's a few 70s there if you scan the list. So
There are. Even North
let's have
Sydney.
a look at that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So as you said, 76.2 from 57 Oxton City and Inner South. Inner West, we've got 73.9 from 39, but North Sydney Hornsby, nearly 80%.
Yeah, that's good.
79.1 from 61. So, there's a few more 70s there, a bit more in the 60s. We obviously have, it's very spread in Sydney at the moment, but I think there's some, really good encouraging signs that we're starting to see long-term trends now. We're now into the 5th month of the year, and we're well and truly getting a pattern. So these are good results, really.
You'd have to say too that the areas or the sub-regions that are getting good results too aren't necessarily the lower priced areas, are they? I mean, that top end of the market's holding up quite nicely in Sydney.
Yeah, you'd think almost the opposite, wouldn't you?
Yes,
You'd
you
think
would.
in the market we're in, you'd think the top end would be softer, but it's clearly not based on these statistics. And I mean, you can get out to Parramatta, it's still 66.7 from 31 auctions, so it's pretty spread. But yeah.
Okay, well, let's have a quick look at our top sale out of Sydney before we go to Melbourne. Okay, what have we got, mate? This one is in Annandale, 89 Johnson Street, 4,025,000. Bressick Whitney selling this one. Chris and Nick, well done, guys. 5-bedroom, 2-bathroom, 3-car.
Yeah, Kevin, this one, not on a large allotment, 311 square metres, I looked it up. And it's probably had a lot of work done to it over the years by the looks of it, but it was last sold in June 2008 for 2.1 million. So it's basically doubled in 10 years or thereabouts. So that's pretty much on target. But a very grand looking home, well presented throughout, and it's got a lot of accommodation there. If you skim the photos, it's got a lot of different accommodation through that home, and particularly the fact that it's got access from the side there.
Yes, I saw that.
You've got the side driveway where you can park 3 cars.
I think I saw the agent coming in from the side there.
Yeah, someone coming in. That's right. Interesting photos there from the agent. But, yeah, a lot of informal and formal living areas.
Yeah,
it's
very
got
much
indoor, outdoor areas. It's got French doors that open onto terraces, sandstone entertaining areas, Millet appliances, all the sort of things. There's a parents' retreat that with some good views, a media room. So, everything you'd really want in a terrific part of Sydney there. So, good result, guys. Yeah, well done.
Yep, well done. Okay, we'll tell you about the top Melbourne sale, but before we do, let's have a quick look at the Melbourne sub-regions. As we bring it up, Inner, would you be disappointed with that? Nearly 100 auctions and under 50% clearance rate, Geoff. Is that fairly normal, or is that a bit disappointing?
No. That stood off the page a bit for me this week, which was interesting, and I might over the course of the week try and analyse some of those sales in there. But that's normally more closer to the Melbourne average.
Yeah.
So that's down a bit this week, but probably propped up by some of the others, and particularly the Outer East, 72.7 from 30 auctions, and Mornington Peninsula only 13 auctions, but 75%. So. A few 60s there.
Even Northeast, 60% off 82 auctions. That's a pretty good result.
Yeah, I think anything 60 or above is pretty good in this market. And whilst we're seeing, we often refer to the Inner East of Melbourne, and that's 63.5, but we're seeing, a little bit more consistency above 50% in Melbourne. And for the inner area of Melbourne to be the lowest sub-region, that's sort of one out of the box, really. Usually it's another region, yeah.
It'll be good to see if you can have a look at those sales during the week and let us know by Friday anything that stood out for you, Geoff.
Yeah, I will.
Regions,
Yes.
Yeah, Yeah, it'd be good to talk to some of the agents too. Okay, let's have a look at the top Melbourne sale, 343 Montague Street at Albert Park, 3,290,000. This one sold by Geoff Kazar and Simon Carruthers from Kazar Real Estate. 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom, 2-car. Approximately 240 square metres, postage stamp block, but gee, a lot of house on that. 240 square metres, that's for sure.
Yeah, well done to Geoff and Simon. Great result. Yeah, it is. It's a very imposing Victorian style residence. As you said, not a large allotment, but if you go through the rooms and the floor plans, there's it's really nice. A good mixture of timber floors, the opening it to an outdoor courtyard area that it gets sunlight. There's car accommodation, double garage off a lane at the back, which is very good. But it's really cute and in a great location. Not far from Albert Park Lake and things like that. Yeah.
I love the front of these terraces. I mean, that wrought iron is just magnificent, isn't it? And really, for their time, they're quite generous in space. Not a lot of land, of course, but the house itself quite generous. The size of the bedrooms and all the rooms, in fact.
Yeah, those Victorians really attract people because of the street facade, and they did actually have good sized rooms in their day. And this one obviously has been fairly extensively changed at the back there, but essentially the same sort of floor plan that you would have got years ago. And they're really popular today. People want this character and charm, and that's exactly what they got with this property.
Yeah, and I find it interesting too that in that era they didn't necessarily focus on bedrooms. It was more the number of rooms in the dwelling, and this one is promoted as a 7-room terrace. I mean, it wasn't, we focus a lot on bedrooms, but anyway, they're all functional rooms, that is for sure.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, having the bedroom at the front there with that wrought iron looking out.
Isn't it beautiful?
It is. That's a lovely room, that master bedroom.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's a corker, yeah.
Okay, before we take you to the Brisbane and Adelaide sales, I just want to go a little bit different. We'll have a look at the regional auction results. There are a couple of good standouts here. I think we've got to keep an eye on the regions, Geoff, too. We'll just bring that graphic up. Yeah, Sunshine Coast. Look at Geelong there at 53 or almost 54%. Not a lot of auctions, but a nice clearance rate.
Yeah, Kevin, whilst the market, as we know, over the last 12 or 18 months has certainly softened, a lot of the regional areas have actually performed well, and you and I have spoken about that. And some of these areas included have actually held their own. And whilst the auction, they don't typically be areas where you'd see large numbers of auctions, but what we're seeing is, and I remember 12 months ago, Geelong was outstripping Melbourne in terms of their clearance rates. And then it sort of went through a patch where it died off a bit like everywhere, but it's come back. And we're now seeing over 50s in Geelong. And to get 40% on the Sunshine Coast from 25 auctions, I actually think that's a pretty good result.
When you look at Brisbane, Brisbane this week only got a preliminary clearance rate of just under 40%, 39.2 off 83 auctions. So, Sunshine Coast at 40% is not too bad. And Geelong, I mentioned Geelong earlier, but even Wollongong, look at that, 35 auctions and 47%.
Yeah, correct. And I look, when the market starts to improve, and we're starting to see some improvement in the market compared to late last year, the auction method of marketing is a really good way of really finding out what the market's doing. Because vendors and agents alike are trying to assess what the market's doing, and it's really what the buyers are prepared to pay.
That's right.
And getting them there and getting them to put their hands up really does determine a market value. So the Wollongong result, that's very encouraging, and that just shows that affordability often drives people into these areas because they are more affordable than the likes of Sydney or Melbourne particularly.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, we'll take you to Brisbane now. Top sale there was recorded by Ray White Paddington, Judy O'Day and Michael Kleemeyer from Ray White Paddington. $1,625,000 for the property at 21 Grove Street, Red Hill, 5-bedroom, 3-bathroom, 2-car. Delightful pool at the back of this one, 716 square metres. Typical house for Red Hill's a very small area, but very tightly held, and this is a great renovation example.
Yeah, and a lovely job by the agents in presenting this property, and it just shows that if you weren't familiar with the area and you skimmed this house on the internet, it'd stand off the page because of the way it's presented. So yeah, it's very very light filled, as the agent says. Has a walk-in robe ensuite to the master. It's north facing, and you mentioned that pool deck area.
Delightful.
If you just you're walking out there and that deck overlooking the pool and a few steps down into the pool, they are terrific stuff. And I again, this has had a lot of work done to it, this house, but I checked the last time it sold, and our records of CoreLogic show June 2004 for 457,000. So there's been a fair bit done to this house, I'd suggest, between now and then. But it just shows you that if you do invest into these good locations, you'll get your money back, because this is a pretty good result, and well done to the Ray White guys.
Yeah, and I do think 716 square metres of land is a good parcel, particularly in Red Hill. You don't see them too many that size. So well done, guys.
No,
that's good.
Not too big to sort of be a lot of work, but it's not too not too small to not have a good outdoor area.
Yeah, well, and you're not going to be living on your neighbour's doorstep either. I think it's a pretty
that's
important
right.
thing.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll take you to Adelaide. I'm going to tell you about two sales there. We'll show you pictorially one, and that was the top sale under the hammer, which was at 25 Heathpool Road at Heathpool, 1,112,000. This one sold prior. The other one we'll tell you about sold under the hammer. We'll tell you about that in just a moment. But the one that sold prior was done by Carter Partners in Burnside. Richie Carter selling this one, 4-bedroom, 2-bathroom, on 801 square metres. So we'll talk about this one first, Geoff.
Yeah, this is a home that was, looks a bit 50s, but had, according to the agent there, a very clever and great extension in the 80s, and provided it with a lot more accommodation. And when you walk through homes like this, you've got all the polished pine floorboards and the higher ceilings and the ensuite to the master, and it's got all the reverse cycle heating, cooling, large informal and formal areas, expansive sort of bay window to the dining room. These sorts of things really attract people, and it's got almost that semi-rural feel about it.
It
by
does.
the looks of, you look out all the windows, there's greenery, and so if you wanted a tree change but didn't really want to go too far away, this would be a good house for that, because it feels like you're in the bush when you're looking out the windows. So,
and just looking through the house too, predominantly white, but they've made it pop with a lot of colour. There's the timber on the floor and the furnishings and so on, and they've really done this one well. I would guess that it's probably been staged, but it would have been a big job, this one.
Yes, it probably was, I'd say. It's a big home and offers a lot of accommodation, and of course, well presented. There's walking distance from some of the shops there. So, well done, Richie. Good job on this one.
Indeed, and well done to you too, Geoff. That's the end of the show. Oh, no, just before we go, I just want to mention that one that sold under the hammer over the weekend. Century 21 recorded a sale just under $1,950,000 for the property at 14 Main Avenue, Frueville. We've got no slides or video to show you of that one, but still a good sale, and we wanted to mention it because it's always good to look at the sales under the hammer as well as pre-sales, Geoff. Yeah,
exactly. This was a 20s bungalow-style house, but... very well presented, and terrific job by the Century 21 guys there in Millswood,
All right, and on that note, Jeffrey, we'll say farewell for today. We'll look forward to getting the final results from you later in the week, and if you can have a look at those Melbourne results, that might tell us an interesting story for Friday.
Yes, we'll do.
Good
Talk
on
soon,
you,
Kevin.
Jeff.
All the very best, and hope you had a good Mother's Day in your family.
Yes, and you too.
Yes.
Good on you,
All
mate.
the very best. Talk later.
Right.
See ya.
Okay,
Bye-bye.
thanks. Geoff White from CoreLogic there. And we'll see you on Friday with a full wrap and the final results from the week that we've just had. I'm Kevin Turner, and we'll see you then.
Evening, Clara. Home, please.
David, what's on your mind?
I was just thinking of a different time is all.
It was a time when I used to sit up there,
Driving wasn't just about being taken from place to place, but going somewhere. Feeling something along the way.
Please, David. You should relax.
I'm afraid that's just the problem.
David, where are you going? David? David?